Hi my loves, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing my wintry book recommendations for you. I know it's really late. I kind of wanted to get this up in time for a bit earlier in November, but alas, here we are. So hopefully these will sustain you through December, January, February. Yes, don't think there's any surprises in here, to be honest, and they're all books that I have talked about before / recently, or I feel like I harp on about a lot of these books, but hopefully it should be new to some of you. As you can see, I've switched positions today. I think the vlog should have gone up already where I announced that I am pregnant. I haven't actually filmed that vlog yet, but I'm hoping that that's gone up already, and I cannot be sitting on the floor anymore, okay? So I'm propped up against the end of my bed with my pregnancy pillow as well. So yes, hopefully this will be a little bit more comfortable for me. It's kind of nice because you get to see different part of my bookshelf, I guess, but it's kind of not nice because you get to see a fair chunk of my TV as well, which I don't love. In the new house, there's not going to be a TV in the middle of my bookshelves, it's just going to be books and it's going to be nice. Don't get me wrong, I love this wall of books, but I do think the TV ruins the aesthetic sometimes. Let's get started and stop waffling on. Yes, so wintry book recommendations. Picked out a few books for this video, but some of the books from my October recommendations video will also work for this. Anything that wasn't particularly spooky and was more on the autumnal side of things, I think would definitely still work for this. I'm thinking The Overstory, Master and the Margarita, I'm thinking Fingersmith, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. All of those books that weren't really spooky per se would also work for this video. So if you didn't watch that and you want some extra recommendations when you get to the end of this video, then head over that way. I will link it up down below for you. Before we get started, there's some books which are hidden amongst these books, because some of these books are stacked like 3 rows deep. And it's my His Dark Materials. I wanted to put them in this video, and if I don't say it now, I will forget. Just like I forgot Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights for my October recommendations video, which would also work for right now. So yes, think of the Brontes. And also, if you've never read His Dark Materials, maybe you're watching the BBC/HBO show at the minute, please read it, it's so good. I love winter for getting into long books, fat books, trilogies. By the way, I know it's not winter around the world. Yes, obviously it's winter where I am, so my mind is on wintry books at the minute. I like trilogies, things I can get my teeth into. So if you've never read His Dark Materials, now is the time. It starts off in a parallel world to ours, a parallel Oxford. People have demons, which are these little creatures that essentially represent your soul. They're sort of a part of you. When you're young, they shapeshift between animals, and then they kind of settle as you get older. So everyone has a demon. I wish I had a demon. It's a very cool concept. I loved it as a kid, I love it now. Basically, it follows a young girl called Lyra, who is a very important little girl / young woman. Philip Pullman just creates a really good story with those books, and an amazing world, and I just love it. I'm not explaining it very well because I just feel like I'm not holding it. So yes, but they are hidden, and if I don't mention them, I will forget and then I'll be annoyed with myself. So if you haven't read His Dark Materials, now is the time. On to a book called Generations of Winter. So pretty obviously wintry. It's by Vasily Aksionov. He is a Russian author. This is a piece of translated fiction. It follows a family through the Stalin era. I read it last year. I actually believe I read it in summertime, but it has a really wintry feel because it's set in Russia, and it's really beautiful. I remember really liking it. Obviously, as with all of these sort of recommendations videos, I haven't read these books in a while, so my mind is not fully attuned to them, and I could regurgitate my reviews at you, but I feel like that is a bit boring. But I will link up any reviews I've written for these books down below, so that you can go and look. at my review when I was a little bit closer to the reading of these books. I remember loving it. It follows a family over a few decades, I think it is. You get really involved with this family, you love them, it's heartbreaking, it's very well written, it's quite long, so good also from that perspective for this time of year. And it also includes a fair amount of actual history. I think Stalin himself makes an appearance in this, so there's things to take away from it from that in that respect as well. I just love a multi-generational family story. Next, I think this will come as no surprise to any of you who have at least been following me since late last year. This is The Greenlanders by Jane Smiley. I'm going to reread this soon because I love it so much. However, it's not going to be a book for everyone. I feel like I need to preface this book by saying that sometimes, because it's not an unusual, well, it's kind of an unusual book, but yes, it's not going to be to everyone's taste. Anyway, so it follows a group of Nordic settlers in Greenland. So yes, Nordic peoples settled there for, I can't remember how long, I reckon it'd be 100 to 200 years. I could have got that wrong. Way back in the 14th, 15th century, and they eventually ended up leaving because life there was so hard, and yes, their way of life, their way of living was not really conducive to living in Greenland. So it's kind of an ode to a lost people, I guess. It's written in the style of an Icelandic or Norse saga, so this is not one of your kind of psychological realist novels. It does follow a family or a few families over a few generations, quite a few generations actually. So yes, it covers a lot of ground, but it's very different from Generations of Winter. But it's not doing that kind of psychological realist narrative. Instead, it's doing more of a saga. So it's quite reserved in its style. It's quite oral history-esque in its style. There's lots of repetitive names. There's not a lot of speculation about the internal emotions and psychology of the characters. However, when you do get glimpses of that, it is especially beautiful. And yes, what I love about this book is that it's very subtle in that respect. Like, it is really emotional, but you kind of have to find those moments. It's a gorgeous book. I love it so much. You have to be prepared for a lot of discussion of livestock farming in Greenland. Certain things happen again and again, when they go seal hunting, that sort of thing crops up every year because that was life there for these settlers. Like I said, there are lots of names which are sort of similar, and a big cast that you kind of have to try and keep track of. There's a list of characters in the front. Now, that sort of thing doesn't bother me. In fact, to me, it usually signals a book that I'm really going to like, but it will not be for everyone, and a lot of people do find this book really boring, but I love it. I love it. I think it's, like I said, I think it's subtle. I think it's really actually very emotional. I think Smiley really embodies the voice of the saga so well. I will talk about this again probably soonish, maybe not at length like I did when I first read it, but I am planning to reread it. But yes, the reason why it's good for winter is because it's long. We're following that family, you can get stuck into it. If you like it, you're really going to like it, I think. And it's set in Greenland, which is so cold and just, yes, wintry, and it's an extremely difficult landscape. Also, I love a book where the landscape and nature, it plays a huge role, and this is one of those books. So I haven't stopped thinking about this book since I finished it, and I'm very excited to read it again. But yes, I want to warn anyone that if that sounds like your idea of an absolute nightmare, don't read this book. But to me, it just sounds like heaven. Whilst we're talking about landscape, here is another of my favourite novels from last year. In fact, I think this one and The Greenlanders were like my top novels of last year. And I think nature and the landscape has a big part to play in that. I think it's something that speaks to my soul, especially when I read it at just the right moment. Yes, I love it. So this is In the Distance by Hernan Diaz. It is a sort of deconstructed western. It's about a young Swedish boy who goes to New York in the 1850s. He goes with his brother, but they end up being separated, and he's supposed to go, in fact, sorry, he's supposed to go to New York, but he ends up in California. He misses his New York, sort of the New York leg of the journey, and he gets separated from his brother, and he's spending most of the book trying to get from California to New York, which are obviously on opposite sides of the US. He encounters all sorts of people that populate the West, or that would have populated the West at the time, and it is sort of got that quest narrative and that episodic sense to it, but in a very sort of subtle and deconstructed sort of way. The reason I like this one for winter, I think, even though it's not necessarily, sometimes it's a bit wintry, sometimes not so much from what I can remember, but it's got a real sense of isolation and loneliness, which I know is a little bit sad. Maybe you don't want to feel that in your books at the moment, which is totally fair enough, because we're all feeling it a little bit in life. However, if you would like to resonate with a book, this could be one for you. But yeah, it's got that sense of isolation, and I think Hukan's story will really draw you in. So to me, when I think of it, I think of sort of winter. The prose style I remember being really nice, but definitely readable. You don't kind of have to get into it quite as much as with Jane Smiley's book. I remember finding it really moving and just really liking it. So that is In the Distance, another book I'm going to reread soon because I loved it. This one I think I mentioned on my Instagram last year, talking about winter book recommendations. So I'll mention it briefly here as well. This is Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. I also think of this one as Blanketed in Snow. I think because there's a specific scene where the narrator is basically blanketed in snow, or in a landscape which is blanketed in snow. And it's very quiet. Again, I like a quiet novel at this time of year, a reflective novel, and one that's going to move me. But anyway, this is quite a quiet book. It's got moments of high drama, just like In the Distance and The Greenlanders. It's got moments of really high drama, but they're kind of pared back and they're chosen really carefully, which I love in a book because I think it makes things more poignant, more moving. So yes, it's got moments of high drama, but it's delivered in, from what I remember, quite a quiet first person narrative. So it's about Ruth and Lucille, who are orphans growing up in the small desolate town of Fingerbone in the vast northwest of America. They find themselves in the care of their aunt, I think, who is a little bit eccentric. Yes, steeped in imagery of the bleak wintry landscape around them. There you go. The Sisters' Struggle Towards Adulthood is a novel about loss, loneliness and transience, and it's also a novel about being a woman. It's obviously called Housekeeping. The house features a lot in this book. Sylvie herself is not your typical housekeeper. Yes, I remember really loving it when I read it at uni in Edinburgh actually, and I would like to reread this one at some point as well, but it does make me think of winter. I've got to do a little mention for Hilary Mantel. This is obviously the final book in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy, but if you have not read it from the beginning, then obviously the book that I'm recommending you is Wolf Hall. I have obviously read these books throughout the year. I read one in February, one in like July time, and one now in November. So I've spread my Mantel out through the year. However, I do think these books would make excellent wintry books. Again, for all the reasons I've said. They're long, you can get your teeth into them, it's a trilogy, you might have a little bit more time, maybe, hopefully, to kind of settle and concentrate as we move into winter. Yes, they're just fantastic. Obviously, I've talked about them a lot this year, so I won't go into too much detail. And I'll talk about this one a little bit more in my November books video, but they are about Thomas Cromwell, who was one of Henry VIII's advisors, counsellors, and he's the one with 6 wives. So we're talking like the 1500s. And basically Thomas Cromwell came from nothing, or was from a low-born / not aristocratic family, and ended up being one of the most important people in the realm, ushering in the English Reformation, being a big proponent of that, which was England's break with Rome and with Catholicism. So yes, he ended up becoming extremely important, and he was kind of hated for that, for rising so far basically and becoming one of Henry's main counsellors basically. So he's had a bit of a confused reputation, I think, historically. From what I remember at school, he was portrayed as kind of a baddie. I think Mantel does a good job of trying to rehabilitate him a little bit, but I'm not clear on actual non-school Tudor history, so I don't know how he is perceived these days. Sometimes these historical characters do get rehabilitated a little bit, but yes. So it is fascinating. I love these books so much. Again, it's one of those books that has kind of a tricky prose style. Particularly I think Wolf Hall is probably the hardest to read. The second two are a little bit more straightforward, / it might be because obviously once you've read one you sort of know what you're dealing with Mantel. I think Wolf Hall is probably the sort of most difficult to keep track of. I will leave my links to my reviews anyway down below, but I love them. I love these books. They're such good historical fiction because they really give you a sense of the world that you're in. They really give you a sense of Tudor England. They really give you a sense that Thomas Cromwell is standing before your eyes, which is so hard to do, I think, like genuinely successfully. And I think she does an incredible job, and I love Mantel. I've got more books to read by Mantel. I'm going to read her oeuvre. I just love her now. So that's Mantel. I couldn't do this video without mentioning it because, again, if you've not read this trilogy, if you're intrigued by it, I want to prompt you to maybe take this winter to make a start on it. Another book I read fairly recently and over the summer, I think, is Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko, who are Ukrainian authors, I think, and I listened to this one, and it is a fantasy novel. It's about a young girl called Sasha who meets a very strange man whilst on her holiday at the beach, and he asks her to do something super weird, which is to go for a swim every morning at like 4 AM, and when she comes out she vomits these coins up. Very weird. She's very scared of this man, but he kind of insists that she goes to this school. I think it's sort of university level, I'm not entirely sure on the education system that forms the basis of this book, but she's about 17, I think, and she goes to this school / university to learn something. She does not understand what she's learning, and it is very Kafkaesque, very obscure, strange, weird, unsettling. It's a novel that really plays with quite a lot of fantasy tropes. Obviously she's going to a magical school kind of thing, and she's a young woman, and it's kind of a coming of age at the same time, but it is also a lot weirder than that. There's a lot of interesting, clever ideas in here, really unique ideas as well for a fantasy. I feel like I haven't seen them before, which is quite hard to do, I think. Yeah, the magical system is quite unique, and I just really enjoyed it. Would recommend the audiobook, but I am looking forward to rereading this at some stage in the future physically. But yes, this says it's a complex blend of adventure, magic, science and philosophy expressed through a distinctly Russian voice. This astonishing story will transport the reader to a place far beyond imagining. And I would say that's a good summary of this book. Good for this time of year because, again, it's got that wintry sort of Russian or Ukrainian setting. The school is in this remote village. It's very chilly, so really like this one. Another book I read fairly recently that I feel has quite a wintry feel is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is quite a quiet book as well. It is quite subtle in its style and its themes. It's not a big sort of drama piece, but I enjoyed it. And it's about people living on an island, and slowly things start disappearing. Like this can be anything from like birds, I think, to like a specific type of sweet. Yes, it can be the concept of something, or it can be like actual physical things, or like roses I think go missing at one point. And because human memory is so associated with things, it means that a lot of people begin to lose their memories, sort of become shells of themselves, and as a result they lose something really integral to being and living in the world. Like I said, it's got quite a subtle, quiet style, but the narrator tries to take a stand basically against the loss of these things and these memories, against the memory police. I've just seen that Hilary Mantel herself wrote something with the back of this. Ogawa is original, elegant, very disturbing. I admire any writer who dares to work on this uneasy territory. We're on the edge of the unspeakable. So yes, if you like your dystopias to be a little bit more action-packed, this one is not for you. But if you like a quiet book, then this one I would recommend. We have a couple of Dickens because I couldn't do a wintry book recommendations video without a bit of Dickens. These are a couple of my faves. We've got David Copperfield and we've got Our Mutual Friend, which I read a long time ago, but I remember it being one of my favourite Dickens. David Copperfield I actually read in January, so I didn't read this one too long ago. I love Dickens. I love a bit of Victorian London at this time of year, and I think for a classic writer, it feels very modern. It feels like he has a good grasp of his characters are always memorable. There's sometimes humour in there, there's a lot of drama. This one's for those of you who want something that has a lot of plot, a lot of drama, a lot of sentimentality, because Dickens does all of those things. Yes, I love a Victorian novel, I love a bit of Victorian London. And Our Mutual Friend is more of a kind of sweeping, one of his sweeping novels. So I think it looks at lots of different characters, different people, and the plot line sort of weaves itself together over the course of about 800 pages. I would like to reread this at some point. It's his last completed novel actually, and I think the later Dickens novels are the best ones. With brilliant satire, Dickens portrays a dark, macabre London, inhabited by such disparate characters as Gaffer Hexam scavenging the river for corpses, enchanting mercenary Bella Wilfer, the social climbing Veneerings, and the unscrupulous street trader Silas Wegg. Yes, it's a great look at London, Our Mutual Friend. And David Copperfield is one of his more focused ones, so it focuses obviously on David Copperfield himself and his life. This one I laughed out loud at, I loved, it was fun. David Copperfield goes through all sorts in this book. Much of it is semi-autobiographical as well. And yes, I would highly recommend both. Really love Dickens. He's one of my favourite classics authors. And I think I'm going to try and read A Christmas Carol this year. I've never done A Christmas Carol, which is unbelievable for a Dickens fan. So yes, I'm going to try and read that this year. Okay, last couple of books now. We've got The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. This, Eleanor Catton is a author from New Zealand. This is a big fat book, as you can see. I remember the weather being pretty bad in this book, so that's part of the reason why I'm recommending it for my wintry read. Also, it's long and complex, and it's a good one if you do have a bit more time on your hands to read. It's sort of a mystery novel, I think, from what I can remember. When did I read it? I think it must have been 2018 I read it. It's about a man called Walter Moody who has come to New Zealand to make his fortune. I'll just read you a bit of the blurb. On the night of his arrival, he stumbles across a tense gathering of 12 local men who have met in secret to discuss a series of unsolved crimes. A wealthy man has vanished, a whore has tried to end her life, and an enormous sum of money has been discovered in the home of a luckless drunk. Moody is soon drawn into the mystery, a network of fates and fortunes that is as complex and exquisitely patterned as the night sky. This one has that kind of historical style, I think, sort of like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell a little bit. Yes, it's also, I remember it being quite clever, quite layered. There's things going on with astrology, I think, in this. And then finally, I wanted to recommend a Le Guin because, like I said, winter is the time for me for quiet books, quiet narratives, and quiet narrative voices. It's like that for me all year round because they're some of my favourite books. but Le Guin does it so beautifully in her Earthsea books, which I also find there's something about them that's very comforting. I just love them. These are fantasy novels. I've heard them described as kids' books. I think they could literally be read by anyone. You all know I've been loving the Earthsea novels, and I think I finally finished them, but I haven't read all the Earthsea short stories, and I absolutely loved them. I loved the whole cycle. I would highly recommend the whole thing. This is the first 4 books in this volume, and these first 4 follow a young wizard called Ged, who is basically learning how to be a wizard. And magic in this world is all about equilibrium, balance, and I love that about these books. There's just something really touching about them. Lots of them are about friendship and love, and like I say, balance in all things, and nature, and all the things that I absolutely love. I believe I said if you like quiet books but you don't typically read fantasy, try Le Guin's Earthsea books. If you like fantasy but you don't like quiet books, I don't recommend Le Guin, because I do think people just find her sometimes a little slow, and she's not your typical fantasy author. It's not action-packed, but there's so much going on in these books that is beautiful. They're from the 70s, I think, these ones, but they still feel very young and relevant, so I love them. And don't be put off if you feel put off by the concept of dragons and wizards. I feel like she handles them really, really well here. It's not very Tolkien-esque, it's her own style. So those are my wintry recommendations. I hope you enjoyed. I hope there were a few surprises in here. I know that a lot of these books are ones that I talk about all the time. I hope you have a good reading winter, and keep me updated on what you're all reading. I'm hopefully going to have a good reading winter. I'm very excited about it myself, to get stuck into some longer books myself. But yes, thank you guys for watching today, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!